All right, so in this app that we're going to build today, we're going to learn about how to make a multi-page app. So we're going to navigate from a home page to a few sub-pages and back. So that'll result in us learning about the navigation controller today. And also, we're going to play a little bit around with images, so having a background image and also having a faded background image to serve as a nice texture. We're also going to learn about the WebKit view and trying to make the WebKit view work in SwiftUI. It's not working yet. It hasn't been created for SwiftUI. So we're going to learn about another object that allows objects in UIKit to be displayed in SwiftUI. And so this object, UIViewRepresentable, is useful for any object that has not been converted over to SwiftUI yet that exists in UIKit to allow you to continue to build apps in SwiftUI. We're also going to play with other little controls such as sliders, segmented controls, which are now known as the picker in SwiftUI, as well as the DatePicker and so on. So let's go ahead and start creating our project. So we have our iOS single view app. All right, and I'm going to call this M2 P1 for part 1. I'm going to call it multipage. And make sure that the user interface is SwiftUI. And I'm going to hit next and give it a home. All right, and so now let's start by adding our images to our project. So whatever images we want to use in our application, we need to add it to our project. There's a file called assets.xc assets. When I click to open that, this is a special file that allows you to hold all of your images in here. And you can see by default the app icon is generated by default. It allows you to automatically drag your app icon into the different placeholders here at different sizes. And so by default it takes care of the app icon. But we have other images that we can add into this same file, or you can have separate files if you wish. So you can add a new assets.xc assets file if you wanted. But what I'm going to do is I already have some images that I'm going to add into the project. So I'm going to open up Finder, and I have it right here. So I have 4 images here. Let's see if I can, there we go. So I have 3 buttons, all right, and I have a home page. What I'm going to do is I'm going to select all of them and then drag them into here. And you can see I have my image files. Now in Finder, you can see that the file extensions .png, 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 and then the last one home.jpg. You notice that those names are omitted here. In your code, you go by the names that are over here. All right, so without the file extensions. Now, if you need to pause the video for a moment and find your own images, go ahead and do so. What you're going to need for this project is a landscape image that would serve as a nice background image, and then a few, 3 images, square images that would serve as buttons. In my case, I have transparent backgrounds for my 3 buttons because I want to illustrate transparent backgrounds and show you that a really nice app is not your typical square button. What you would do is you would create images using Photoshop or using a separate graphics artist who's an expert in Photoshop or whatnot to create these button images in irregular shapes, and then you would bring them in. Now, the main thing to think about here is that you notice that the file extensions I'm using here are there for a reason. So my home page is a JPEG, and JPEGs, we know they're very good for reducing file size, so good compression there. So it's perfect because then you can create a nice, high quality, high resolution background image for your application and save on file size by using JPEG. But the button images are PNGs because PNGs and GIFs, for that matter, support transparent backgrounds. So if you have an irregularly shaped image button and with a transparent background, PNG and GIFs are perfect for that. So that's why I have the files as the way they are. All right. So what I want to do now is I want to start into my home page. So contentview.swift. And the first thing I want to do is just get my image to display. So what I want to do here is replace text with an image object. So I'm going to say image, and my file name is home, and I want to say .resizable, .scale to fill, .edges, ignoring safe area for .all. All right. The reason I'm doing these is because I want to have the background image stretch across the size of the screen and go over all the safe area edges around the edges of the phone. So I don't have any white space at all. I just want to stretch it out and display it. Now, what we're doing today is we're building a landscape app. So what I want to do is I want to go to my project settings for a moment. So I'm going to click on the very first line here, the name of my project. And I have an area here on device orientation. All right. So I'm going to uncheck portrait. I'm going to uncheck landscape right. All right. I just want landscape left. And let's give it a run. I'm going to go with iPhone 11 Pro Max. That's perfectly fine. Hit run. And there we go. There's our background image, our home page, all stretched out to cover the entire size of the screen. Now, the next step is I want to add some buttons. And to do that, I need to add a stack. But here's the thing, in our last video, we talked about horizontal stacks and we talked about vertical stacks. But I want to have this image as a background image. So I want to have other objects on top of this image. So I need to use another stack called a Z stack, or for my American friends, a Z stack. So what I'm going to say is Z stack, open my curly, close my curly, and so my image is encapsulated inside this Z stack. Just going to tab things over. And now I want to have the three buttons overlaying those the background image. So I'm going to use an H stack here. All right. And I'll start by adding my first button by saying button action colon over my curlies. There's my curly. All right, closing curly. I'm just going to do a print statement. A print statement will print to the console so we can actually see and verify that the print was occurred. So we'll say print. This will be our game page. So game button pressed. And put some text. Sorry, no, not text, but image. So I'm going to say image. I'm just going to double check the name of my files. So home_games is what I'm going to put here. All right. And we'll say .rendering mode is .original. All right. I'm going to do that for two more buttons. So I'm going to copy, paste. But it'll be, so the second button will be settings. So say settings, button pressed, and then home_settings. And then the third one will be about, button pressed, and the image will be home_about. And I can go ahead and run. All right, so there we go. There's my three buttons right there. Games, and I click games button pressed, settings button pressed, about button pressed. Now you'll notice that the buttons were in the center of the screen. What I want to do is I want to push those buttons towards the bottom of the screen so that they align a bit nicer in my look and feel for the graphics that I have. So the trick is actually to add an alignment to the Z stack. to the horizontal stack. So I'm going to go to the closing curly of the H stack, and I'm going to add a frame call here. So we're going to say dot frame, width is 800, height is 425, but the most important thing here is alignment will be bottom. All right, so I want to align it to the bottom of the screen. You can play with these numbers as you see fit. I kind of find that I'm playing with these numbers, and it kind of brings me back to the whole auto layout discussion of just trying to numerize the locations of your different devices, because I know that this will probably not work nicely on a different device, and so this could pose a problem in our multi-device support eventually. But for now, just to play around with the iPhone 11 Pro, this should be fine. So I added this in. Let's run it again and see what it looks like. So there we go. You can see the 3 buttons are aligned nicely towards the bottom. Okay. Now, the next step that I want to do here is I want to add a few other pages and navigate to those other pages. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add the pages first, and then we'll connect them up and get them to run. So I'm going to right click or 2-finger click on your trackpad on the folder M2 P1 multipage, and I'm going to say new file. And I'm going to go iOS, and I'm going to go SwiftUI View. All right. I want to have a new SwiftUI view. And I'll hit next. I'm going to give it a name. So I'm going to call this Game View. And just hit create, let it give it a home. All right. I'll just drag it up, put it next to Content View. I'll do it 2 more times. So I'm going to right click again on the folder, go new file, go iOS SwiftUI View, and I'm going to call this one Settings View. All right, just drag it next to there. 1 more. So I'm going to right click again on the folder, new file, iOS SwiftUI View. I'm going to call this About View and hit create. All right, so I got my views. Now, when you're dealing with multiple files, it's good to actually put them into folders. So I'm going to right click again on the same folder, M2P1 multipage. I'm going to say new group. New group is basically like new folder here. And I'm going to call this views. I'm just going to drag my 4 files. So I'm going to drag content view, hold down command button and multi-select game view, settings view, and about view into views. All right, so everything's nice and organized. Now, what I want to do is I want to navigate from the content view page over to this over to one of these new pages. So I need to switch a few things around. First off, I need to use something called a navigation view. And I need to add that to my content view.swift page. So now here's the tricky thing. We're dealing with multiple files here. You need to keep your files straight as you're building your app, because you can get lost and accidentally put code in the wrong place, right? And then really get confused as why is it not working, what's going on here. So content view.swift is my home page, and I'm going to add the navigation view tag to it over here. So I'm just going to scroll up just above the Z stack. I'm going to say navigation view. All right, I'm going to put my closing curly at the end of the curly for Z stack, which is this one, I believe. Actually, yeah, that one. All right, I won't worry about tabbing and cleaning up the code here, but now I have a navigation view. Now what I need to do further is at that closing curly, that I just added, is I'm going to say dot navigation view style will be stack with a capital S, navigation view style. Without this extra tag, it's going to give, and it's not going to navigate nicely. You're going to have some issues with buttons on top of each other. Now, I also want to add a navigation bar title, because you're going to see that a bar will pop up. There's no text for it, so I might as well add some text to it. So I'm going to say dot navigation bar title. I'm going to say home. Now let's run this. So now you see a navigation bar has been put on top. You could play around with it. You could change the color and whatnot. I'm not going to get into that today, but you could always look up and see like how to. I would actually make it transparent in this case. That way, at least more of the background image shows up a bit better. But I'll leave that for you guys to research and figure out on your own. Now the trick is to change these buttons into what are called navigation links. Right now they're just buttons, and they perform an action specific to this page. What I need it to do is perform an action specific to navigating to another page. So the button is no longer useful to us. So you actually have to modify the code here to do something different. So we're going to use a navigation link instead. So I'm going to start by, well, first I'll just comment out this whole entire block inside the H stack, because it's not, and we might as well just retype it. And open up some space. What I'm looking for is navigation link. And open up a bracket and say destination, colon. Now I want this first button to go to the game view. So I'm basically instantiating a game view here. I'm going to say game view, instantiate it, and then close my round and open up a set of curlies. And inside of this, I'm going to say image and home underscore games, and say dot rendering mode is dot original. And I'll do this 2 more times. So I'm going to copy and paste for the other 2. So the second navigation link will be settings view. So I'm going to instantiate settings view, and its image will be home underscore settings. And the third one will be about view. It'll be home underscore about. All right. Now let's run this and see what happens. So I click on games. It says hello world, right? And I hit back. Settings, hello world, hit back. About, hello world, and hit back. Now we didn't touch anything in those 3 views, and if I pop over to one of them, game view, you'll notice that by default it generated our default hello world. So we know that this is working. We know that page navigation is up and running now. We're able to navigate from our home page to all the 3 subpages. If you really want to verify that it's going to the correct subpage, just change the text hello world to be like game world, settings world, about world, and you can verify that it's working that way. So now what we want to do is we want to start off inside games view, and let's set up our background image for the game view. So here I'm going to add a Z stack again. So I'm going to replace this hello world text. I'm going to say Z stack. All right. And I'm going to put my image call in again. So I'll say image. It was called home. Let's double check the name again. Yep, just home. So image dot home. We're going to use the same extra properties that we had before. So dot resizable. and then dot scale to fill, dot edges, ignoring safe area is dot all. And finally, now, actually, let's run it first. I'm going to talk about one more property that you'll want to add. So go to games. You can see, yep, we've got our background image for games. What you're going to find is we're going to be adding more stuff to this page. And you're going to find that based on our background image, it's going to look very cluttered and very difficult to decipher what's on the page. So a little trick that I like doing is to still continue to load the background image on subpages, but fade it out so it looks like a texture. Like you still have the image, but the background looks more like a texture, like a nice little effect. So I'm going to add one more feature here, or one more property here, and say dot opacity. I'm going to set it to 0.25. A number between, I would say, 0.15 and 0.3 is good for what we're about to do. The whole less is more motto. Now if I hit games, notice that my background image is faded out. And it's there. It's a nice little texture. But it gives that effect that allows you to be able to make it look like more of a professional looking app. Okay, and there's more consistency. Like you're using the exact same background image, and you're just making it more of a texture in this case. So consistency is also an important thing too. All right, so let's do this for all 3 pages. All right, so we've done it for the first one already. And actually, before we continue on, we also need to add a dot navigation bar title. I'm going to put game, so it has the title text on it as well. So if I just run it one more time, go to games, there you see game. All right, now let's do it for the other 2 pages. So I'm going to switch over to settings, and do the same thing. All right, so I'm going to remove this text, use another Z stack, and say image, again home, dot resizable, dot scale to fill, dot edges, ignoring safe area for dot all, and dot opacity at 0.25. Now whatever number you choose, you should use that same number all across your pages, so it's again consistent. Like don't use 0.15 someplace and 0.3 in another place. It just looks very inconsistent and very unprofessional. So whatever number you choose here, keep it consistent all the way through. And of course, dot navigation bar title. This will be settings. All right, let's run it. Go to our settings page. You can see the same thing here, our texture, and hit back. Do it one more time for about. So Z stack, and do an image. Home, then dot resizable, dot scale to fill, dot edges, ignoring safe area for .all. And finally, .opacity will be 0.25. All right, and don't forget your .navigation bar title will be about. It was out of place. It's supposed to actually be up here after the closing for Z-stack. Now let's run. And there we go. So now let's focus on populating the game view page. So I'm going to go to game view, and I'm going to add, in the UIKit world, we call it a segmented control. In SwiftUI, they've changed the name to picker, which kind of makes you wonder, because there's already a picker view in UIKit, and how the naming is going to not confuse developers will be an interesting thing to see. So what we're going to do is, I have my Z stack, and that's fine, that's good. What I want to do is add a V stack right below my image call, so that I can vertically add stuff on top of the background image. So I'm going to say V stack, open and close my curly. So I got that. And I'm going to start by adding in my picker. And it's not the same picker that you see in UIKit. So it's not like that Price is Right wheel type thing. We're going to say picker. And what I need before I continue on is a state variable to track what was clicked on. So I'm going to go to the top, just below the view call, and say at state private var difficulty. So we'll do something like easy, medium, hard for this picker. All right, so we have VStack, picker, and now I can continue on my definition of this picker. Open a round bracket. I'm going to say selection, colon, and then dollar difficulty, comma, label, colon, and I'm going to use a text here. So I'm going to say text difficulty level. And I got my two closing round brackets to match up with the text in the picker. And at the end of this line, I'm going to open up a set of curlies. I'm going to define my three segments. So I'm going to say text, easy, and I'm going to give it a tag number. So .tag of 0, and then text, medium, .tag of 1, and finally text, hard, and then .tag of 2. All right, and we'll say at the end of the closing curly for picker, we'll say .picker style will be segmented picker style. All right, now let's run this and see what it looks like in the game view. Say games. You can see here's our picker, our segmented control. It has nice animations too, which is what the UIKit version of it didn't have. So you can see it slides between the different segments. All right, now I want to add a little bit more to this page. I want to set it up so that it prints out the difficulty right below it. So I'm going to continue on after this picker style call. I'm going to say text, so I'm going to say text difficulty will be, and then slash difficulty. All right, and let's run this again. Go to games. Now it says difficulty 0, difficulty 1, difficulty 2, which Sure, it is doing what it's supposed to, but this doesn't tell my user anything. Like, why does the user care about 0, 1, and 2? It cares about easy, medium, and hard. So we need to add an array so that we can convert that 0, 1, 2 to a text that would actually make more sense. So right below state, I'm going to say var diffs equals easy, medium, hard. All right. Now I can modify this text line to be self.diffs of difficulty. All right, now try it again, and you should see the correct difficulty. There we go, difficulty easy, medium, hard. Okay, so now we got the segmented control up and running, and we're able to pull out the value of it that's been selected and use it as needed. In this case, we're just printing to the screen. What I want to do is add a few more labels and hard code some information, such as level number, time left, and score. But what I want to do is I want to do this in such a way that I'm passing information from another view into this view. So let's learn about how to pass information between views. So I'm going to define my state variables, my values for level, time left, and score in content view. So those values will be inside content view, and I want game view to pull them from content view. So let's switch over to content view.swift. And I'm going to define my values up here. So I'm going to say state var time left, which is a string, and I'll just say equal to, I'm going to hard code a number to be like time left will be like 34. And I'm going to say state var level num, which is also string, equals level 3. And also state var score, which is also a string, equals, say score is 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. All right, that'll be our score. All right, now what I want to do is I want to pass this into our game view and use it there. So I'm going to switch back to game view because I have to make some changes to game view first. First off, I got my state variable in content view. So I have to define some binding variables over here in game view. So I'm going to continue on below state. And I'm going to say binding var time left string. Binding var level num is string as well. And binding var score string. Okay, so I got the binding that's going to receive the data from content view. But I have to make a change here in content view.swift so that it passes it along. So looking at the navigation link for game view, and I instantiate game view here, I have to change this so that I'm passing in my 3 variables. There we go. So I'm going to start typing in time left, colon, $time left, comma, and then level num, colon, $level num. And finally, score, colon, $score. Okay, so now I've made this modification here to game view, and I'm passing in those three values. Now I'm going to switch over to game view, and I'm going to add in my labels to print out those values. So I'm going to add in some text right below the text difficulty. I'm going to continue on with this. I'm going to say text slash level num text slash time left and text slash score. All right. Now let's run this. And it's going to complain. What I'm going to do is I'm going to delete the whole struct game previews here. Right? It's giving an error because it doesn't like what we've done. So I'm just going to kill this and run it again. Go to games. Now you see easy, level 3, time 34, score 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. It pulled those values from contentview.swift and it's printed them here in game view. All right. So now we've basically completed the game view page. It's now time to move on to the settings page. All right, so now let's switch over to settingsview.swift. All we've done so far is we've added our background image. What I'm going to do now is continue on from my image call inside settings view and add a VStack again. And what I want to do is I want to add a slider, and I want to print out the value of the slider as it's sliding along. We'll make it like a fictitious volume level slider. So I'm going to add a private variable just to keep track of that value. So I'm going to say at state var slider value extends double, set it equal to 0 by default. And now I'm going to add my slider. So I'm going to say slider value colon $slider value comma in. Now the in argument specifies the range, the minimum and maximum values you want inside your slider. So I'm going to say 0 ... 100. This is saying that my smallest value is 0 on the slider, and my largest value is 100 on the slider. All right. So I got my slider. I'm going to put a text right below it. Say text volume will be, and then slash slider value. But what I want to do is so it'll give me like 8 decimal spaces for slider. So I'm going to say, I'm not going to close my round bracket for slider value just yet. I'm going to say comma specifier colon and then open some quotes and say %.2f. It's already a float. I'm just limiting it to 2 decimal spaces. So close that quote, close my round bracket, and close my quote for text. Now you notice what's funny is that as opposed to other languages, I have double quotes inside double quotes, which would normally cause a lot of bad things to happen in your code, whether it be C, Java, C#, or whatnot. But here in Swift, you'll notice that I have double quotes inside another set of double quotes, and it's working perfectly fine. All right, so let's run this and go to our settings page. All right, so you see there's our label. There's our knob right here. I'm going to slide it, and you can see that it's working fine. All right. Now the next thing I want to do is to the settings page, I want to introduce a date picker and show you how you can select dates and times from allow the user to select dates and times and work with it in your app. So the date picker is a specialized picker object that specifies, like I said, date and time. You need another secondary object called a date formatter that can read the data from the date picker and convert it into a format that you wish. So whether you want like day, month, year, or just day and month, or hour, minute, second, or just hour, like you can specify that in the date formatter object. So what I'm going to do is just below my state definition up here, I'm going to define another variable. So I'm going to say var date formatter extends date formatter with a capital D. Open my curly. I'm going to say let formatter equal, and I'm going to instantiate date formatter. Now what's going on here with this var definition is that I'm actually performing some work on this var as we instantiate this value, this var. So I'm instantiating date formatter. I'm going to specify the style, say formatter dot date style will be equal to dot long. And then finally return formatter. All right, and that's it for the date formatter object. Now, what I want to do is I want to specify a state variable to keep track of the selected date. But I'm going to start off by initializing it. So I'm going to say at state private var, call it birth date equals date. All right. Now let's work this all together into the date picker. So down here, just below my slider text, I'm going to call up a date picker. And its first argument will be selection colon dollar birth date, comma in. So like I said for the slider, in is the range of dates you're going to allow for this date picker. So I'm going to say from the earliest possible value to the current date. Okay, so I'm going to say in colon, just dot dot dot, and instantiate a date object. So this is saying from the beginning of time up to the current date. Okay, and then I'm going to say comma and say, what do I want to display? So I'm going to say displayed components colon dot date lowercase. And then also going to add some text to this date picker. So I'm going to open up a set of curlies and say text and just say select a date. All right, that's it for the date picker. Let's work this. Let's go to settings. And you can see here, you have select a date. You have your date you can pick. All right. So you see, notice it didn't allow me to go past. I'm going to go like 2028, 2029. It just reset back to 2020. All right. So that's because I set my max date to be date, current date. Now what I want to do is, one last thing on this page is print out what was selected in a text line. So I'm going to add one more text call outside of the closing curly for date picker. I'm going to say text date is slash and round brackets birth date. I'm going to not close my round bracket just yet by saying comma formatter colon date formatter. Now try again. settings, and there you go. Date is September 19th. So I'm going to go back in time. And there, 2010, so changing the month. So you can see that the line is updated accordingly. All right, so we've covered the game page. We've covered the settings page. All right, the last thing is the about page. And on the about page, what we're going to do is we're going to put a web view and display just a website inside the WebKit view. So to do that, we need to introduce another object. So let's switch over to the about page. Now the thing about the about page is that with the WebKit view, they haven't introduced WebKits yet into SwiftUI. So we have to sort of wrap around a UI kit object, in this case a WebKit view object, into something that SwiftUI can work with. So I'm going to introduce a new struct at the end of this, and we'll come back and we'll start using it. Actually, I'll put it right here. I'm going to say struct WebView extends UIViewRepresentable. All right. Now, with a WebKit view, there are 3 steps to getting a WebKit to display. First, you define a URL object, which has the website that you want to go to, like google.ca. And then you have the URL request object, which is like the manager object of the request. It goes to the web server and downloads the data accordingly and brings it back. And then finally, you tell the WebKit view to make it happen. All right. Now, in order for us to do anything, we need to import. We have already import SwiftUI. We need to add another import for WebKit. All right. So we have here WebKit that we're importing. Now within UIViewRepresentable, first we're going to define our URL object by saying let URL extend URL capital. All right. Now there's a method called makeUIView. So I'm going to say func makeUIView. All right, we'll say context UIViewRepresentable context and cast it to be a web view. And it's going to return a WK web view. Now inside of this makeUIView method, this is where we're going to write the code that we need to get this WebKit view up and running. So we'll say let web view equal WK web view instantiated. Then we'll say let request equal URL request, open up a round bracket, and URL will be self.url, and cache policy will be .return cache data else load. All right, so basically saying check the cache first. If this website's never been loaded, then go ahead and load the website from the web server. And then we'll say webview.load for request. And finally return webview. All right. Now there's one other method we have to add to this struct. So we'll add it right now. And that is to bring in update UI view. So we'll say func update UI view. And we have an underscore there. We'll say web view will be WK web view context is UIViewRepresentable context for WebView. Open and close your curly. Here we're going to say let request equal URL request we'll say URL is self.url and cache policy will be again .return cache data else load. And then finally WebView.load for request. All right, so the first method, its purpose is to create the WebKit view. The second one is to refresh the WebKit view. So this one gets executed first upon loading the screen. If you say you want to go from Google to another website, then it's going to call this one and refresh the WebKit view. All right, so that's the main difference between the two methods. But basically, we're running almost the same code here. Okay, so we've got our WebKit view inside something that is wrapped that SwiftUI can use. Now let's add it to our page. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to scroll up, and here inside our about view, I'm going to first define a website that we're going to go to. So I'm going to say let URL address equal URL string, and let's just say https://www.projectmkd.com. It's my website. And now let's add in our web view. So what I'm going to do is I'm not going to add an H stack or a V stack because we'll just overlay this on top of our background image. So just below the image call, I'm going to say web view of URL address. Now it's going to ask you for an optional. It's going to complain. To make it happy, let's just put an exclamation mark. All right, now let's run this. So there was an error, and actually if you look, this is supposed to be URL request capital. So a little bit of a typo there. Let's just fix that. So URL request. Now we'll run it again. There we go, succeeded. Go to my about page. And a little slow to load, but there you go. All right. So there you go. That's the website I'm loading here. Okay. And so that covers everything for the app we're building today. So let's recap what we built. We've learned how to add multiple pages. So we have a multi-page app. We're navigating from our home page to a few sub-pages. We learned about how to work with images, how to put them inside the assets file, and also how to set up a background image for all of our screens. And then also on the sub-screens, make them a texture so they look a lot nicer to work with. Also learned how to turn our buttons into images. So we have like little images for our buttons instead of just the simple boring text. We learned about how to deal with segmented controls, which in the UIKit world is known as a segmented control, but in the SwiftUI world, we know them as pickers. We also learned how to pass data between content views. So going from passing data from a home page to a sub page. We also learned about the slider, how to slide, how to update our labels when the slider is slid across the screen. And we finally learned about the WebKit view and also how to bring in an object that exists in UIKit but does not exist in SwiftUI. All right, and so we've learned how to do that. All right, so that covers today's app. I look forward to seeing you in the next application.